Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So,
Should we
hello.
start?
We can
Yeah.
start. Oh,
All
yes.
right. Hello and welcome
So,
to Right Rising, the official podcast of the Far Right Analysis Network. I'm your host, Alexander Reed Ross, and I'm here today with my co-executive director, Vera Tika, and Miroslav Mareš of the Masaryk University in the Czech Republic. So, Professor Mareš is at the Faculty of Social Studies and has spent decades researching the Czech far right and the transnational far right. And so, given the recent elections in the Czech Republic and a number of complicated political issues, we wanted to bring you on the podcast and speak with you with To Act 4, our official collaborative partner, um, about everything that's going on. So thank you so much, Professor Mareš, for joining our podcast.
Okay, thank you for the invitation. I hope that it will be fruitful also for the people who can see us and hear us.
Okay, yeah. So your work, I think, is fascinating because we find it on the intersection of a number of different sort of axes. And I would describe this matrix as involving kind of transnational propaganda, foreign fighters, and coalition building within the European and Eastern European far right. So, my first question is how did you start to research these things that have become so, vital for everybody to understand today?
Yeah, thank you for your question. It's really old story because and we can look deep in the history because originally I was maybe more focused generally on party system, and then it was also maybe something like a request of the maybe chair of my department at the time. However, also the Czech maybe security bodies because they want to consult some issues. It was a request to maybe to consult some issues with academic sphere. And at the time, they asked the Department of Political Science at the time of the Philosophical Faculty of Arts of the Masaryk University. And one of my colleagues, he dealt with this issue very, very, very intensively. But he left the academic sphere and he became the public official at the Ministry of Interior, and he recommended me as a potential maybe successor of this issue. So I was starting maybe with this maybe violent extremist scene, and until this time I was maybe dealing. I was more focused maybe on this party system issues, including democratic parties and radical parties and also non-democratic or extremist parties. But since this time, I was maybe more focused on right-wing extremist scene, including violent extremism, and it was also reason for my involvement in this issue. Originally in the Czech Republic, then in the broader maybe Central and Eastern Europe.
So yeah, I noticed that some of your earlier stuff looks at sort of vigilante
Yeah.
right-wing violence and this idea of
Yeah.
leaderless resistance, and this also involves more recently some of your work on autonomous nationalism. I think is that right? So
Yeah, that's
um,
right.
I I think the Czech Republic is one of the sort of areas where that theme kind of or tendency really started to develop strongly 10, 15 years ago, where you have the I mean kind of traditional far right politics but given a kind of aesthetic makeover and produced with black bloc tactics in sort of urban guerrilla
Yeah.
style, protesting and fighting with the police. So can you talk a little bit about your research in this interesting area?
Okay, so maybe we can again we can look more deeper in the history because we can start in 1990s. When I started my research in 1990s, yeah, the end of 1990s, frankly speaking, And it was a time, at the time, it was not the era of autonomous nationalism, black bloc, etc. It was time of these hardline skinheads, and including neo-Nazi skinhead subculture in the Czech Republic. And this several people from this skinhead scene, they were responsible for real racist attacks, mainly against the Romani minority in the Czech Republic, but also against foreigners and against the opponents, mainly from the left far of political spectrum. So if you look into this decade in 1990s, we can see really several, for example, more around maybe 20 racist murders in the Czech Republic, as I said, committed mainly against the perpetrators were from the racist skinhead scene, and the victims, they were mainly Roma, foreigners, and leftist or liberal opponents of this fire scene. And then, as you said, really came to the change of the maybe visual style or some maybe propaganda style of this right-wing extremist scene, and they returned to this black bloc style of autonomous nationalists, so-called free nationalists inspired from German scene, how they were connected also to leaderless resistance organizations or networks to the United States. And then this scene became maybe more professional, if I may use this cynical word for this, because they really maybe left this violent gang attacks at Roma communities, not in the whole Czech Republic. I can mention also one case from 2009 when it was attacked one house with Roma family, and 2 years old girl was seriously burned on maybe 80% of her body. It was tragic, attacked by 4 skinheads in 2009. But if you look into this first decade, maybe on the second half of the first decade of the 21st century, and then if you look to the years maybe 2011, 12, 13, then we can see as I said, this professionalization of the far right scene. For example, the huge public demonstrations against the settlements with Roma community with support of part of local population. It was a typical maybe feature of this year that this neo-Nazi scene or racist scene was really able won sympathy of some of the of part of the local population in several regions with maybe some problems with interaction between Roma community and majority population of ethnic Czechs.
So my next question is, what is the relationship? And then I'll turn it over to Vera for her questions. What's the relationship between these sorts of violent autonomous nationalists and leaderless resistance on one hand, and then the rising populist radical right? On the other hand, we saw in the recent elections a pretty significant boost for the populist radical right in Czech Republic. But on that hand, and then also with the Russian disinformation that you've been studying. So the three things, are they connected? Are they
Partially connected? Thank you for this question. It's a really good question, and it's really requires something like a very specific answer, because we should look into the development of this originally neo-Nazi scene. One part of this scene, they really turn this ideological preferences to the Putin's Russia. Why? Because they see something like a new strong leader, and this new leader in Moscow can be maybe something like a substitution for this historical person of Hitler. So that's maybe the change of the mindset of some neo-Nazis from this era of 1990s or first decade of the 21st century. On the other hand, you still have some small scene of this maybe neo-Nazis, and they are still maybe deeply rooted in this traditional mindset, traditional point of view of world questions and etc. Yes, and when we are talking, for example, about the situation at the turn of the first and second decade of the 21st century, we can see at the time the rise of this sympathy towards these racist movements. However, they were politically represented at the time mainly by the small party called originally Workers' Party. Then this party was banned in the Czech Republic, and its successor party was called very similar Social Workers' Party of Social Justice. But still, this party received maybe in one election around 1%, and in some regions it received maybe 4.7% of votes, etc. But still, it was very weak. But at the time when this party was on the rise, then were established new populist party in the Czech Republic. And they became more successful because they maybe were not so openly racist, maybe they were not so openly, and definitely they were not so deeply rooted to the neo-Nazi scene or to some historical models of Nazism, etc. And it was the reason why they became more popular. Another reason was maybe dissatisfaction with the Czech politics in general, and then, of course, also utilize in 2015, 16, 17 the so-called migration crisis, because it was generally maybe until this time was not so huge topic for East Central European countries, but then we can observe this maybe say transfer of many migrants across the East Central European countries. Yeah? It was something untypical for this region, in the sense, for example, of refugees from Syria or from Middle Eastern or West Asian countries. Yeah, and it was something like a mixture of these factors. And this mixture caused the rise of the new populist parties, including recent party which is called Freedom and Direct Democracy, led by Tomio Okamura. But generally, we can see something like a gap between this traditional neo-Nazi scene and this new populist party. Really, also for example, maybe the staff of this party, the personal background or people in organization of these parties, they are different than, for example, these traditional neo-Nazis. Of course, some of these old-style neo-Nazis, they, before the last election, said, okay, we should vote for this SPD. But we can see maybe more something like a preparedness of the large part of population for potential vote of the party, which was until this time not so accepted, or maybe these opinions were not so accepted in broader public. But after maybe 2014, 15, 16, we can see also the acceptance of this maybe anti-migrant, anti-governmental, anti-Western values in broader part of society. And it was a reason for the success of the new populist parties.
Just a quick follow-up. So, when we were talking about foreign fighters on the far right, and this is some of your most recent work, you have a book out that was recently published about this in English. Are you seeing people from the more just broader populist areas joining these foreign mercenary, or not even mercenary, but foreign fighting groups? Are you seeing people from the leaderless resistance kind of tendency joining these violent missions? What are you observing in terms of who is becoming a foreign fighter?
Again, now I have left the Czech Republic because this question maybe focus more broadly. But I want to turn also to some Czech specifics. Generally, we should turn into the 2014. At the time, the Ukrainian far-right scene was interconnected with this traditional neo-Nazi scene because they really use some symbolism of traditional neo-Nazism related, or not neo-Nazism, traditional Nazism related to some tragical parts of history of East Central Europe, and then we can see really the flow of maybe neo-Nazis to some military units on the Ukrainian side. On the other hand, also the part of the European fascist right, including, for example, several French neo-fascists, they were more inspired by the ideas of Euro-Asianism propagated by, for example, the Russian philosopher or political scientist Alexander Dugin, close to Putin's maybe mindset, etc. And we can see at the time the presence of far-right fighters on both sides of the front line. What happened after 2022, after the February invasion of Russia? We can see that the number of maybe something like real neo-Nazis into the Ukrainian armed forces is not so huge as in 2014. On the other hand, we can see really the rise of some extremists on the Russian side, but they are, and now if I may use the term, which is not mine, how it is the term of my Polish colleague Kasper Rekawek, he speaks about the so-called red-brown cocktail. Yeah, so it's a mixture of so many of these people. They have some specific sympathies, for example, to Stalin's Soviet Union. How they are very intolerant to new migration, but they are against the democracy as a political system. But they support authoritarianism. They use maybe as a symbol red stars, but sometimes they mix this also with some far-right symbolism. As I said, really, the appreciate them is this red-brown cocktail, as Kasper Rekawek call it. So that's maybe something like an ideological mix of many foreign fighters. On the other hand, then we can distinguish between individual countries, yeah, because, for example, the foreign fighters from Serbia, they are maybe traditional nationalists with links to the traditional Russian far right. On the other hand, if now I turn back to the Czech Republic, here you can really see the presence of people without some deeper ideological background, with some pan-Slavist sympathies, because both Czechs and Russians are Slavic nations, so they try to use these pan-Slavic ideas to reason this involvement on Russian side. Yeah, so still you have also this strange ideological mix. Okay, I said that recently you can see the decline of presence of neo-Nazis on Russian or on Ukrainian side, I'm sorry, but still you have several small units, and they are something like a hub for presence also some of these several of these traditional neo-Nazi fighters. What's if I can turn back to your ideas or to your question on a leaderless resistance, I can connect this traditional idea of leaderless resistance with modern militant accelerationism, very popular now in the Western Hemisphere. And you can see also here some specific involvement of this militant accelerationists in Ukraine, in war between Ukraine and Russia. On one hand, yeah, also some of these people maybe were connected also to the Ukrainian side. But recently, if you look to the organization called the Base, led by U.S. neo-Nazi, however, recently probably with a headquarters, with a seat in Russia, I think that we can see in this propaganda of the Base recently on social networks the attempt to win the sympathy of part of the neo-Nazi scene for this anti-Ukrainian fight. Because, for example, the Base, they claim that the organization Base claims that the leaders want to establish something like a ethnically white state in Carpathian Ukraine, in the western part of Ukraine, present Ukraine, and they try to maybe establish this country or state with help of some neo-Nazis pro-Russian sympathies. That's maybe something like an attempt to divide this militant accelerist scene, because former accelerators organizations, they express more sympathy maybe towards this Ukrainian neo-Nazi units or alleged neo-Nazi units. Recently, you can see this attempt to use this organization base for propaganda in neo-Nazi circles with some anti-Ukrainian direction.
Yeah, thank you very much for that answer. That is really interesting and covers a whole lot of ground and answers all the other questions that I had. But I want Vera to be able to ask some questions because you know I know you have a limited amount of time and
Sorry for this.
no, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Alexander and Professor Mareš, for these insights into the transnational and security dimensions of the Czech far right. I would like to ask, since you touched on the broader environment, security challenges, etc., I would like to ask to what extent Czech far right actors are influenced from other movements or far right actors elsewhere in Europe, in the USA, or even in Australia. Do they borrow strategies, narratives, or even economic resources from them? And also, if they have collaborations with Germany, Austria, Italy, far-right actors?
Okay, thank you for this question. It's a really difficult answer because we should divide this scene into these militant neo-Nazis and to the new populist right. And now we can see different directions and different foreign partners of this extreme right. If you look to this, maybe I can start with this violent, really neo-Nazi scene. They are well interconnected with foreign partners, mainly thanks to the new social networks. And recently, we can see maybe this the interconnection of traditional neo-Nazis, including, for example, former members of Hammerskins or Blood and other organizations. They are still involved, for example, in this music scene and I mean now white power music, because it's still something like a mobilization tool. Recently, not so focused on young people, but it's still focused on young people who are now in the age around 40, 50. And they can cooperate, for example, with Italian extreme right or with some other countries in the spread of this and in the popularization of this white power music. And they can maybe sell also some music in some social networks, maybe from 1990s. Another maybe field of cooperation of this traditional neo-Nazi scene, recently very popular, is in the sport area. And I mean mainly the mixed martial arts and some similar sports, and this, for example, box club or something like this. That's now the subject of the new part of cooperation, so-called active clubs, also originally founded in the United States, when is this idea of this traditional neo-Nazi scene to establish active clubs as a local gyms, local boxer clubs, local MMA clubs, and they the official, the public aim of this clubs is to maybe the improvement of physical condition or some skills in martial arts, etc., or box or similar issues. But in fact, they are infiltrated, the young people in these clubs are infiltrated by neo-Nazi ideology. This original US idea, now it's well spread in Europe, and we can see now also the rise of these active clubs in East Central Europe, including Czech Republic, and they are partially interconnected also thanks to the cooperation between this mixed martial art activists with neo-Nazi sympathies. And not all mixed martial art scene is, of course, influenced by neo-Nazism, but small part, yes. And in this small part, we can see this cooperation. Okay, it was my answer to this first scene related to far right. If you ask me to this new populist right, then we can see also the growing cooperation, including, for example, between the Czech and German far right. It was not so typical due to the fact that due to historical determination from the Second World War, etc. But recently, we can see also this cooperation between, for example, the SPD and Alternative for Germany as a representatives of this new arriving populist party politics. And we can see also the growing cooperation at the European level. And we can see also, for example, in European Parliament, the cooperation, between various far-right parties from European countries, including former Eastern Europe, including former Western Europe in the sense of Eastern Western Bloc. Yeah, maybe we can observe that, though definitely we can observe the recent ties to the United States. If we look to the Australia or New Zealand, I'm not so sure, but here I can again maybe identify some links to this militant neo-Nazi scene, but I don't have information. Maybe there are some contexts, but I don't have information about the cooperation, for example, between Australian populist new right and the Czech populist new right. But definitely we can see this strong cooperation between in European area between these parties, including Czech parties. And now I can turn back to this question on Russian influence. Yeah, we can observe also, for example, the fact that Russia is hosting some of these transnational meetings of so-called national conservative far right. Yeah, so there's sometimes also there are some obscure group that I invited to Russia to discuss, for example, with Russian pro-Putin parties. But definitely we can see also Russian involvement there. And now, if
that's fascinating.
I'm still talking just about the Czech Republic, but when I mentioned this Alternative for Germany, and this party has now strong ties also to Czech scene, we can see, if I may also assess the situation in Germany, we can see also the division in the Alternative for Germany, because one part of this recently in surveys, the strongest German party, but not in parliament, but not in Bundestag, not in German parliament, but in some surveys, this party is divided in relation to Russia. I'm afraid that a large part of this party is maybe pro Putin's party, so recently proclaimed party, but we can see also the opposition to this very open and clear pro-Russian positions. Some parties more skeptical to this cooperation with Russia. And several situations we can observe also, for example, in France or in United Kingdom, in this, if you look to the situation within this modern populist right.
I'd like to turn now to the digital sphere, which is reshaping far-right mobilization across the region and across the world. How would you describe the digital mobilization and online radicalization patterns of the Czech far-right actors today? Are there some distinct characteristics that set the Czech digital ecosystem apart from other countries or settings?
I'm not sure if I can something like differences with countries. Of course, now I can start with this modern populist right. Definitely, if I see, for example, some of this maybe pro-modern arriving populist statements in internet connected with some pro-Russian statements and maybe also with Russian influence, we can see this use of pan-Slavism, that is relatively strong in the Czech internet. And for example, this pan-Slavism works in the Czech Republic, works in Slovakia, but doesn't work in Poland due to the historical determinants, due to the historical conflicts between Poland and Russia. So in Poland it doesn't work. In Czech Republic and Slovakia, yes. So that's because this part about this maybe modern populist right. If I can turn back to this militant scene, and it's my fault that I forget it to mention it in my previous answer, we can see now also the rise of this really new youngsters networks in social networks as originally was connected with terrorgram and with some links to the origin of Engels 090 in Western countries. Recently, for example, we can see the new phenomenon of so-called Milikolos Creek, and they are really this neo-Nazi I said neo-Nazi, but it's a really strange mixture of some brutal ideologies, neo-Nazism, Satanism, maybe also the so-called white jihadism, etc. And it is focused not on maybe on some well-equipped, some experienced politicians, etc. But it's really focused on teenagers and in the age, for example, 12, 13, 14 years, yeah. And they try to use very brutal videos. Some if you look to the TikTok videos of some of the groupings, this is a 1-minute video with some executions, decapitations committed by neo-Nazis, by the so-called Islamic State, by another brutal groups in the world, and they simply try to win the sympathy of this maybe of youngsters dissatisfied with their life. Yeah, so that's really strong focus to win sympathy in the minds of these teenager groupings, and then these teenagers are well manipulated. They can be then responsible for some brutal attacks. And I can tell several years ago was committed a crime in Bratislava, committed by a very young boy. He killed 2 people from LGBT community, and he was inspired by another Slovak citizen, young student, and he studied in Brno, in the town where I'm now located. So he studied in Brno, and he was connected with some people in California, also in the global terrorgram network. Yeah, so we can see this international in this virtual sphere, in the cyberspace, and here really we can see this interconnection and daily talks between people from, for example, from Central Europe and in the Pacific Coast in US. Okay, so thank you for your questions.
Thank you, Professor. That was extremely insightful. Alexander, perhaps you can pick up the thread from here.
Yeah.
Well, I think we'll have to, bring everybody back together sometime in the future, because I think Professor Mareš has to go.
Definitely, I can discuss this more. Frankly speaking, I'm now invited to the how to say in English, when there is a new book, it's also baptism of new book, very new book, because I'm now invited because my colleague from the Constitutional Court of the Czech Republic wrote a book about disinformation in the Czech Republic, and I invited to one theater in Brno to be the guest of this how to say the invitation of the new book into the market. Yeah, so that's the reason why I am today not so in the time that I have to leave, because originally I was told that I can be here longer. Yeah, so but in next 20 minutes I should be in one theater here in Brno. Yeah, so
all right. Well,
but definitely we can meet again. Also, for me it's no problem. We can. This is for me maybe the good time if you have 9 a.m. So I have 6 p.m. So that's acceptable for both sides. So
yeah, thank you so much for joining us. I hope your event goes swimmingly, and I hope people check out your work and your latest book. What was the title of the latest book about foreign fighters?
Good question. Foreign fighters and extreme right.
There we go. Foreign fighters and extreme right.
I send you the full title because frankly speaking, it was just a moment. I also forget the whole subtitle, but because they changed it in last time.
Yeah.
It's this.
This is in Czech or
No,
in English?
It's in English. Yeah.
It was published now in October, but it's published in 2026. Also, the next year is the official. I put in the chat. Yeah, so that's my newest book. It's not my book. I'm co-editor with one German colleague, with Daniel Köhler, and I'm author of 1 chapter and co-author 3 chapters. But it's not just my book, but we have several authors, including from United States. Is David Mallet. If you can invite him, he's perfect. He's also perfect expert on foreign fighters in general, both jihadists, etc. But in this book is dedicated just to the extreme right foreign fighters. So this David Mallet wrote on this extreme right fighters from United States. But if you want more guests, this my co-author from Germany, Daniel Keller, he's a chair of the de-radicalization center. And
Mhm.
he is also active in this field. Yes, also, and he wrote also a book about the far-right terrorism in Germany several years
Mhm.
ago. So recently he works on more issues, but definitely he's also one of the influential books just on this violent neo-Nazism, this terrorism in Germany.
All right, yeah. So,
Okay,
well, thanks again for
okay,
joining us.
okay. Thank you too. And now I definitely have to go because I just 30
Thank
minutes
you,
now to run.
Professor
Yeah, so
Maresh.
sorry for this. Yeah,
have,
thank you and
have a good
bye.
evening.
Thank you. Bye. Bye. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for the invitation. Bye.
Thank you.
All right, so I maybe we can spend a few minutes kind of unpacking before we sign out. What do you think?
Yeah, of course. It
Um,
was wonderful, right?
yeah,
Maybe we can devote another podcast, Alexander, uh, to these foreign fighters. Maybe we can invite David Keller from the de-radicalization, maybe on de-radicalization strategies, etc., landscape in Europe. What do you think?
yep, absolutely. I think what's fascinating here and what Professor Marish was kind of focusing on is the kind of movement of the violent extremism, right? So we go
Yeah,
from the kind
excellent.
of skinheads in the 90s who are doing violent
Yeah,
crimes to this within
Marches,
this
Roma.
leaderless, yes, resistance framework attacking the Roma and houseless
Mhm.
people, and then from there, the with the rise of the far right and the nationalist, autonomous nationalists, you have this kind of
Mhm.
new form of the far right, right? With which is like these extreme violent extremists who sort of intermesh with, but also sometimes oppose the populist radical right.
Mhm.
And then you also, during this
Mhm.
period in the mid 2010s, have Russian disinformation, amplifying oppositions and also supporting the national conservative movement, and more recently, the far right kind of rising um,
Mhm.
amid the war
In
in
Ukraine,
Ukraine, exactly.
mhm.
So, I
And foreign
if you had,
fighters. Yeah,
yeah, all over the world, sort of increasingly taking up this the red brown cocktail. I do wish
yeah,
if he had been able to stick around a little bit longer, I think your questions about the ideological evolution of the Czech far right, the especially the populist party, would have been interesting
yeah,
to learn about.
yeah, yeah. But we didn't have much time, so yeah, I skipped them.
Hmm. No,
Yeah,
yeah, but I think
yeah.
that
And how many actors are operating in the Czech Republic would be very interesting question.
mhm.
Yeah, kind of introductory question.
Yeah,
But yeah,
I
it was very, very nice.
I think it's really fascinating to learn about the Czech far right because so much of it is so similar to what we see everywhere else. And I think that's part of what he's talking
Yeah,
about is like there are local features in the Czech Republic or in Hungary or in Poland or in Germany, obviously very, very different climates, very different sort of
yes. And
relations between the state and the government and the parties. But at the same time, there's a lot of communication and interlinking and hybridization between movements in these areas that share common ideology.
Yes. And at the same time, they are against each other. So this is the the big
Yeah.
puzzle, Alexander. Yeah,
Yeah.
how do they communicate, collaborate with each other, uh, and at the same time they are, uh, historically speaking, they are against each other. Yeah,
Yeah. It's almost like
this
there are
guy
two interests.
within this environment of nationalism and yeah, revivalism of
Mm.
nationalism. Yeah.
Yeah. It's almost like there's two interests. There's like a transnational interest where they recognize as sort of the interest of a solidarity and strategies against a common enemy. And then there's on a nationalist level, there's a sense that a nation that is conscious of itself and works towards its own good, common good, naturally also has an enemy in the other nation that's trying to do the same thing. So underneath the common alliance against the common enemy, there's this friction where the
Yes.
nationalists, oppose one another for historical, territorial, even cultural and linguistic reasons.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh yeah, and I mentioned it earlier, but this has been a collaboration between the Far Right Analysis Network and 2 Act 4. Do you want to
Yeah.
talk a little bit more about 2 Act 4?
It is my organization. It
Yeah.
is against xenophobia, discrimination in Greece, but Western Balkans and in Europe also. Um, yeah, I funded it together with a colleague of mine, Nikolaos Gaitenidis.
All
Yeah,
right. Well,
and
so
Alexander, I was thinking also if we make podcast series also for other countries, for example, Bulgaria, Serbia,
Mhm,
Romania, very interesting, and
mhm.
different countries of the world, and to make it on a frequent basis.
Yep, yep. That's what we're doing.
Yeah.
But for everybody who's been listening, thank you very much for tuning in. This has been the Far Right Analysis Network monthly meeting. No, just kidding. A podcast with Miroslav Mareš and, of course, my wonderful co-host today and executive committee co-member Vera Tika, um, with 2 Act 4, and we are very happy to have you here, and hope to see you next time.
Professor Mareš, thank you for sharing your expertise. Alexander, thank you for the thoughtful conversation. And to all our listeners, stay informed, stay critical, and stay engaged. Until the next FRAN and 2 Act 4 podcast episode, thank you for being with us.